Welcome, and this time I'm going to share some thoughts on this sutra that we have been reciting in a row. And early on this visit trip, now I'll try to speak up to show that I'm healing. So early on this trip, I was sharing a conversation with Venerable, and that was during lunch, and we touched on this sutra, and Venerable expressed some interest in knowing some details about what I found in the course of my preparation for presenting this in a series of talks at the monastery in Atlanta. So that's why I'm touching on this, and particularly trying to kind of convey some kind of a narration or a narrative, storyline narrative that runs through these 5 contemplations that are lined up in the way they are in the sutra. By the way, this sutra that you call here the Sutra of Exalted Wisdom Going Beyond is also generally translated as the sutra. Some Losawa House translation, they call it the Noble Mahayana Sutra, the wisdom of the hour of death. The 84,000 version calls it the Noble Mahayana Sutra on wisdom at the hour of death. And there's another one which calls it the Noble Wisdom of the Time of the Death Sutra. So it's called by some other names as well. And here, something interesting is how the translations differ in terms of what the initial question was about. So this is the setting is not on this globe. It's in the outer space, way up. When it comes to formless realm, we don't know where it is, up or sideways. But still, just for the sake of the nature of resultant state from the worldly sense of way we present them at the top, because they have the worldly topmost level of peace. No manifest pleasure, because they are fed up of that. Because they keep ending, keep bringing sufferings. So they're even fed up with pleasure. And there's no need to speak about suffering, right? So they opt for neutral state of being. That's how within the samsaric worldly perspective, just being calm, quiet, at peace, not high, not low, is best. So that's how they are usually presented, up above. Not down under, but up above. Yet they could be anywhere. So, but this setting takes place in the Akanishta, the gods of Akanishta, right? But this Akanishta could be either part of the form realm, or could be beyond that, where only the Sambhogakayas and the Bodhisattvas at the 10th level are exclusively present there. Although interestingly, in the commentary by the 7th Dalai Lama, he says, sometimes people may get special ticket to be even in that company, but short tickets, right? Not permanent, because they do not earn it to stay longer. So that was an interesting mention in the 7th Dalai Lama's commentary. But anyhow, in terms of the initial question presented by Mahasattva Akashagarva to Buddha, the translations differ. One says, "O blessed one, how should a bodhisattva view the mind at the moment of death?" How should a bodhisattva view the mind at the moment of death? And there, bodhisattva, there they use the instrumental case in regard to bodhisattva as to how should they. And then the other one also says, how should a bodhisattva regard the mind at the time of death? But then the 84,000 version says, how should we think about the mind of a bodhisattva when they are about to die? And that's what I prefer. Because I want to think this sutra as a way of giving us a sneak peek at bodhisattva's mindset. Not quite sneak, well, I just played with that term, that phrase, but a peek into the bodhisattva's mind, particularly at the time of death. That's how they differ. And depending on that, the response will also differ. From the Buddha, it would be bodhisattvas should train in this way, or bodhisattvas' mind look like this for us, right? So the bodhisattvas at the time of death train in the wisdom of the time of death, or they contemplate in the so-called wisdom at the time of death. And that wisdom of the time of death consists of the 5 contemplations. So again, in how they present these, they differ. I'll just generally go through this. Since all phenomena are naturally pure, I would rather prefer saying bodhisattvas do this. But there's no explicit mention of bodhisattva there. But I would rather, because I'm looking at it as a peek into their mindset, I would rather have this say, since all phenomena are naturally pure, bodhisattvas contemplate the notion of the lack of inherent existence. But the sutra doesn't say that. So it could be seen that sutra doesn't mention bodhisattva explicitly, except it speaks of cultivating or meditating. So most of the translations kind of are in sync, and they do not, except for one, which says you should cultivate. The bodhisattva, how should bodhisattvas, how should we look, how should a bodhisattva regard his mind or her mind at the time of death? And then the answers all fall into saying you should cultivate this, or one should cultivate this. This kind of a disjoint there. Yeah. But the rest, because there is no mention of an agent in that sutra itself. Rather, it suggests cultivating or meditating on it. So that's why most of these translations say, since all phenomena are naturally pure, cultivate well the notion of the lack of inherent existence. Since all dharmas, I think one translation using it, and I prefer this, since all dharmas. By the way, the word used for all phenomena and all dharma is same in Tibetan. So it could also read, just as in some translations, all phenomena are contained within Bodhichitta. Cultivate well a mind of great compassion. Now the question arises, how in the world all dharmas, all phenomena are contained within bodhicitta? there is a roundabout way to make case for that, but I prefer calling it all dharmas. But even that is not without a problem. How come all dharmas, right? So we will see how it is built in. Since all dharmas are contained within bodhicitta, cultivate well a mind of great compassion. And then the third was, since all phenomena are naturally luminous, cultivate well a mind free of reference point. Okay, the impermanent ones comes later. Anyway, you can all relate to that. Since all phenomena are luminous, cultivate well a mind free of reference point. And then since all, I rather want to call them not entities but things, since all things are impermanent, cultivate well a state of mind that is not attached to anything at all. And the last one is, when the mind is realized, or rather when the mind is fully realized, okay, when the mind is fully realized, that itself is wisdom. Therefore, cultivate well the outlook, or cultivate well the perception that Buddhahood is not to be searched for anywhere else. So anyway, thinking of this as a way of getting some sense of what the Bodhisattva's mental world looked like, particularly at the time of death, and in general, because for Bodhisattvas, every moment is the time of death. Because it could come any time. It is not set at any time, right? So it could come any time. So any moment could be seen. It might very well be seen as might very well be seen as this is it. So what does their mental state, mental world look like? Preferably, unless one is a bodhisattva newbie, unless one is a newbie bodhisattva, one who has generated bodhicitta but not yet developed the wisdom of understanding emptiness, then there are some suggestions. Otherwise, in general, bodhisattvas would have really, under the force of their compassion, would have reached out for what is it that holds sentient beings from enjoying lasting happiness. And they would have to search and search and search. After having taken this responsibility upon themselves, they can't just lay down. Now they have to look for it, work for it. And the work involves looking for what is the source of suffering, what is the ultimate source of happiness, right? And that should lead them to seeing, grasping at something that is totally non-existent as being the source. It's so ironical, right? All the source of our suffering is rooted in grasping at something which has never existed, will never exist. It's like we are already free, except we have volunteered ourselves to be bound into or tangled up. Right? It's like we are holding into something, a moving car, and holding on to it, and blaming the car as dragging me. Whereas if you let go, the car will just go and you will be left behind, right? There was no car dragging you. You let it drag you, right? And so is the case with we are already, at least I say, not we are already free, but we are already free to free ourselves. Because we can just let go of clinging on to something that didn't exist in the first place. So anyway, their main thrust will be to look for the source of suffering, and that's why they would find most success in it, and thus that will be the overarching mindset that will be what you call influencing everything they do. That's why this seeing of all phenomena as lacking inherent existence comes first. That is very prominent, and that, together with bodhicitta, should be the constant influencer, constant what you call background for everything the bodhisattvas do. Here, a little comment on how usually people translate. You say all phenomena are naturally pure. This comes handy in English, and it also looks like that's the perfect way of translating it in the because of the way it is written in Tibetan, Rangshin Ki Tongba. But just written as it is could be translated into two. And the scriptures point to having this, expressed differently. Because there, the non-existent inherent exists, the non-existing inherent existence is considered a dirt. Is considered a dirt. We call that Rangshingi Tima. It is considered a dirt. And a dirt, in this dirt that is tied to how we view the nature of, how we view the aspect, identity of things. So it is considered a dirt by itself. That's why when we attain the Buddha's body, right, of the two abandonments, one abandonment is the culminating abandonment is called abandonment free from the dirt of Rangshin, nature. And the other one is called the abandonment free from the dirt of adventitiousness. So the two are considered as dirts, and the abandonments are seen as cessations of those dirts. Although one of the dirts doesn't exist at all, but has to do with how we see the nature, how we see the identity. So I just wanted to touch on this because it comes handy in English to say naturally pure, but it is, we could say that things are by nature free from this dirt amounting to wrongly seeing the nature of it. Whereas the other one is adventitious dirt, which is the existing dirt that is a big baggage, including afflictions, both manifest and latent, their sabun seeds, as well as their pakchas. All of those come into the adventitious ones. So that's how the topic of the lack of inherent existence, no matter how hard it is, comes very first, because that's predominant. That should be the prominent focus. After one has generated bodhicitta, that's one should be running after, first and foremost. You have taken this responsibility. Now you have to look for what is holding up. And this should lead into the search for the emptiness. Now the second is, since phenomena are, or since all dharmas are embedded in or infused with, or as I was reading earlier, since all dharmas are contained within bodhicitta. Now here it says, this is a reference to the bodhisattvas, because you are asking about bodhisattvas' mindset. And for bodhisattvas, all the dharma that they care for is, or what do you call it? Dharmas of the greater vehicle. Dharmas of the greater vehicle. And thus, for them, all that amounts to them, or all that they are engaged in terms of the dharma, even if that be learning about how the hearers and solitary realizers understand and whatnot, even that is for them a practice of the great vehicle. Because it is fueled, influenced by bodhicitta. Otherwise, there is no need for them to even seek them. So all the dharmas that the bodhisattvas engage are contained in bodhicitta, in that they are contained, or they are grounded in bodhicitta. And bodhicitta in turn is dependent on the generation of great compassion. So cultivate great compassion. Now I'm weaving the storyline, okay? And then the third was, okay, if that is the case, okay, all phenomena are devoid of inherent existence, and since bodhisattvas are engaged in freeing all sentient beings, that grasping is what is holding up, so they must expose that. And then, in terms of their conventional cultivation, what should they be working on? Not just to cultivate anew, but rather kind of enhancing it and strengthening the root of the grip of great compassion within them, so that they could succeed in both the areas that they should be working on to realize their aspiration. And then the qualm or the question arises, and particularly with regard to this mind of great compassion, the seventh Dalai Lama, how he weaves it, he weaves them together, is saying things are all, without exception, lacking inherent existence, almost sounding like they do not exist. But things can't be that extreme. You definitely have to deal with sentient beings. And how would you deal with sentient beings? Of course, as bodhisattvas, they deal with them with compassion, with bodhicitta, like that. And for them, all of their activities are contained in bodhicitta, which in turn is rooted in great compassion. So they would be focusing on great compassion and seeing sentient beings through the lens of great compassion. Then the next one leads to, I don't know if this is the way the Buddha intended or not. It's how the seventh Dalai Lama weaves through this. Then the third is, if that is the case, what does the nature of such mind as great compassion, bodhicitta, understanding of the wisdom, the wisdom, what does the nature of the mind itself look like? They are, again here, naturally luminous, means they are luminous because of free of dirt associated with how we come up with a distorted notion of a nature. So naturally luminous by way of being free of a dirt that is associated with a distorted notion associated with its nature. And that every mind, be it compassion, bodhicitta, the wisdom, the nature is luminous. And because of its luminosity, and that this luminosity goes in both directions, both on the conventional level and the ultimate level. When it comes to conventional level, we are speaking of the mere clear and aware nature of every mind, including afflictions. Their what do you call, psychological nature, their basic conventional, very basic conventional level nature is clear and aware on a conventional sense, and even on a ultimate sense, it is luminous in the sense that that no matter how strong or thick afflictions one may have, it never ever enters the nature of the mind. Plus, the afflictions themselves are rooted in grasping at inherent existence, of which the object is never existing in the first place. In that respect, the mind is also free, luminous, by being free of a dirt that is associated with its conventional nature as well as its ultimate nature. So it has to do with the nature. And then the next question comes, what about those bodhisattvas who may have developed the bodhicitta and so eager to work for the well-being of the sentient beings, but lacking in the wisdom of understanding emptiness? What do they do with it? What do they do? How do they get by? How do they do their best by way of cultivating these other notions of impermanence, which is mentioned here, and then together with this, the other notions of dukkha, everything being in the nature of dukkha, everything being lacking in pure selfhood, being selfless. Those are all included in here, and that's how they, in the meantime, will deal with their attachment, and then progress further. And then the last one was, what's the result of all these efforts? Where it says, when the mind is realized, the Tibetan term realized, for which it is used, realized is used here, is to. To, and literally means understand, but in some cases it means fully understanding in and out of everything. And there too, not just understanding, but just realizing in a literal sense, becoming real. When the whole potential of the mind is not merely understood but becomes real, that itself is the ultimate wisdom, and that is something for which the potential one has always carried, and can fructify and blossom in oneself. That's why there is no need to look for Buddhahood elsewhere. So it's a instruction to the kind of reminder to the bodhisattvas that yes, one has to work within and along these lines, and that Buddhahood that you are so eagerly searching for is not elsewhere. As a way of making case for this last one, the commentary mentions two main things. One, the Buddha's mind and sentient beings' mind, they differ in terms of being defiled and undefiled, but when it comes down to their nature of empty of inherent existence, it's the same. It's the same test. There's no difference whatsoever. That part of that part of the defiled mind doesn't undergo change. It doesn't need to be replaced by something else. It just stays put, and the base mind has to become more and more refined, undefiled, likewise. And then as soon as the mind becomes fully undefiled, fully clean, fully undefiled, then whatever emptiness is sitting on top of it, that is the Buddha's truth body. So there is no need. So it's like saying that you, as a very, very lowly sentient being, and Buddha high up there, let me use this expression, someone up above and someone way down under, they share the same nature when it comes to the emptiness, and particularly that of your mind. Now, not just that, the stream of the mind is the same. The stream of the mind is the same. It's not that when you become Buddha, you replace your old mind with some new mind. It's not that. The mind itself becomes more and more refined, and the stream is the same. Here in Tibetan, we use the term nejur. Nejur has the connotation of changing place, but changing place in the sense that the defiled mind itself, as defiled, doesn't become Buddha's mind, but rather with its defilements being slowly but gradually cleared, without ever affecting its very basic luminous nature, one can attain Buddhahood on that level. That's how it's nejur. Sometimes people use the term transmutation, not transform the anger into a wisdom, but transmute the anger into something. So sometimes they use it. I don't know if that has that same connotation as here or not, but we specifically say nejur. nejur, but not just jur, nejur. In this regard, and soon, in this regard, I heard His Holiness the Dalai Lama saying that basically it boils down to our mind, that we need to transform that. And the mind is such that its very basic nature is not what you call not defiled. Thus, it is pure in that sense. Yet at the same time, all the realizations has to happen from there. Transformation has to happen from there, irrespective. So long as one is a sentient being, all it takes to fulfill the aspiration to be happy has to deal with working with the mind, irrespective of whatever planet system you may be in. And that too ultimately comes down to working with the clear-led mind. Now, in terms of how the clear-led mind might be generated, it will depend on the physiology of the world system. The one that we find in the highest Yoga Tantra with regard to this world may not map up to them. But there's no way of escaping actualizing clear-led mind and thus getting the subtlest of the mind. And the whole process of transformation, transmutation, involves working with the mind.